You earn more than you once did, yet money still disappears before it can become power. Bills rise, obligations multiply, and every attempt to get ahead seems to produce another reason to remain dependent on the next payment. The comfortable belief is that wealth comes from working harder, spending carefully, and following respectable advice. That belief keeps you obedient to the visible rules, while others operate through rules no one explains. You are taught how to earn, but rarely how to retain control once money arrives. Machiavelli understood that power is protected by appearances, silence, and unequal knowledge. He observed that those who command rarely reveal the methods that preserve their command, because knowledge shared too widely becomes a weapon against its owner. Money follows the same logic. Earning is not ownership. Control is. The wealthy do not merely know more financial facts. They recognize the hidden mechanics beneath price, debt, status, access, timing, and risk. They understand that some money decisions are not about profit at all. They are about dependence. They know why appearing less interested can improve a negotiation, why certain debts create freedom while others create submission, and why public generosity can conceal private calculation. These are not polite lessons designed to make everyone comfortable. They are 9 cold laws that separate the person who receives money from the person who directs it. Each law contradicts advice that sounds responsible, moral, and safe, because safe advice often protects the arrangement already in place. If this feels unsettling, pay attention. Discomfort is not a warning to retreat. It is evidence that the rules you inherited are being examined instead of obeyed. Most people want money to reward effort. The wealthy want money to preserve options, influence outcomes, and make future effort less necessary. Once that distinction becomes visible, the silence around money stops looking accidental. It starts looking strategic. Law 1. Capture the harvest before the world can claim it. Most people treat income as permission to expand their obligations. The wealthy treat every payment as raw material that must first be protected. They do not ask, "What can this money buy?" They ask, "What portion of this money must become harder to take?" Picture the ordinary Friday evening. A payment arrives. Before the weekend ends, food is ordered, a subscription renews, a favor is repaid, and a small purchase becomes a reward for surviving the week. Nothing appears reckless. That is the danger. The leak is respectable. Now picture 2 people receiving the same payment. The first sees the balance as available space. A little goes toward comfort, a little toward convenience, and the rest is gradually assigned by requests that arrive before Monday. The second treats the payment as a visitor that must be given instructions immediately. Before spending begins, a portion is moved away from the noise, named for a future purpose, and made inconvenient to reclaim. The difference is not income. It is the order of operations. The strategic few create distance between arrival and consumption. A portion is moved into a separate reserve, a productive purpose, or a protected opportunity before emotion gets a vote. Not what remains, not what feels comfortable. What is captured first becomes the foundation of control. Machiavelli understood that a ruler who depends on every passing mood is not truly secure. The same applies to money. If every dollar must immediately solve a desire, then desire is the ruler. This is not a command to chase a particular asset or follow a specific financial prescription. It is a command to observe the mechanism. Money that is never separated from appetite can never become power. Most people receive first and decide later. Most people let convenience write the first order. Most people call the result unavoidable because the decision was made before they noticed it. The middle class is paid, then exposed. The wealthy are paid, then fortified. One receives money, the other gives money a mission. If this irritates the part of you that believes discipline should feel easier by now, let the irritation work. The sting reveals where the system has trained consumption to disguise itself as necessity. Money becomes power only after it survives your first impulse, and survival is not enough. The next law determines whether what remains can be seen clearly. Law 2. Stop confusing price with worth. Most people accept the number placed in front of them as if it were a fact carved into the world. The wealthy separate price, usefulness, scarcity, status, and timing before making a decision. They know the visible number is often the least important part of the transaction. At a store, two nearly identical products sit on a shelf. One carries a familiar name and costs more. The other performs the same basic function. Most people choose through social reassurance, then call the decision taste. The strategic few ask what problem is being solved, what alternative exists, and what hidden cost follows the purchase. The same blindness appears in work. Someone earns a higher salary but accepts constant availability, longer travel, and weakened health, as if the salary were the whole exchange. Someone else earns less on paper but controls time, builds a skill, and preserves the ability to change direction. One measures money. The other measures terms. A useful test appears whenever the room starts praising the number itself. Remove the label, remove the prestige, and remove the imagined audience. What remains? Does the thing save time, reduce risk, improve capability, or merely reassure the buyer that the purchase will be understood by strangers? A price can be high because a scarce resource is involved. It can also be high because a story has been attached to an ordinary object. Machiavelli observed that appearances often govern judgment more powerfully than reality. In money, appearance can be a premium, a title, a neighborhood, or the feeling of being included. Recognizing the trigger in yourself is not cynicism. It is how you refuse to be played by the game. Ask yourself, is this expensive because it is valuable? Or valuable to you because it is expensive? The masses purchase symbols and defend the purchase afterward. The wealthy inspect the mechanism before they enter it. One pays to look secure. The other studies what actually creates security. A number can describe a transaction. It cannot decide whether the transaction serves you. Once you see that, you are ready to examine the space that turns money into choice. Law 3. Defend the margin. Most people use every increase in income to raise the size of life. The wealthy protect a gap between what comes in and what must go out, because that gap is where patience, bargaining power, and recovery live. A person with no margin cannot wait, cannot refuse, cannot negotiate, cannot survive a delay without borrowing someone else's confidence. Another person with a modest reserve can decline a bad offer, absorb an unexpected repair, or let a promising opportunity mature. The figures may look similar from across the room. Their freedom is not similar. This is the first middle principle, the quiet leverage ratio. Control rises when usable reserves and flexible time grow faster than compulsory expenses. The point is not a perfect calculation. The point is to notice which side of the ratio receives every new gain. Imagine two neighbors leaving for work on the same rainy morning. Both hear a warning sound from the car. One spends the commute rehearsing which payment can be postponed, then accepts an unfavorable deal because the repair cannot wait. The other is inconvenienced, but not cornered. There is enough space to investigate, compare, and choose. The second person is not necessarily richer. The second person has protected more room between income and obligation. Most people increase the furniture of their lives. The strategic few increase the space around their lives. They keep fixed commitments from becoming permanent masters. They understand that margin is not unused money, it is stored refusal. Think about a common morning. The car makes a strange sound before work. One person spends the day calculating which bill can be delayed. Another schedules the repair without panic and still has room to think. The repair is the same. The emotional price is not. Machiavelli warned that a power dependent on another's permission is fragile. Financial margin is permission removed from the hands of circumstance, not luxury, not display. Margin also protects judgment from artificial urgency. When every choice feels like an emergency, even intelligent people accept poor terms simply to make the pressure stop. A protected gap does not guarantee a favorable outcome. It gives the mind enough time to recognize an unfavorable one. If this sounds less glamorous than the advice that promises rapid transformation, that is precisely the point. Wealth often begins as a private absence of pressure, not a public presence of abundance. A protected gap gives you clarity. Clarity gives you timing. But timing without a way to create advantage remains passive. The next law turns restraint into offense. Law 4. Use money to buy position, not applause. Most people spend to demonstrate that they have arrived. The wealthy spend to improve where they stand in the next negotiation, decision, or opportunity. They look beyond the object and study the position the object creates. The distinction is visible in ordinary life. One person upgrades a visible possession because others will notice. Another pays for a tool, process, education, or assistance that removes a recurring bottleneck. One purchase produces conversation. The other produces capacity. This does not mean every invisible expense is wise. It means the question changes. Not, will this make life look successful, but will this make future choices cheaper, faster, safer, or more independent? The strategic few understand that money can purchase time, information, access, and optionality without purchasing a particular asset or making a promise of guaranteed return. They place resources where future decisions become stronger. Consider a small business owner facing a week of repeated delays. One choice is to display a new symbol of success and hope confidence follows. Another choice is to remove the recurring bottleneck, document the process, or obtain information that prevents the same delay next month. The second choice may attract no praise, yet it changes the owner's position every time the work repeats. Machiavelli understood that power often belongs to the person who controls the conditions before the public contest begins. A negotiation is rarely won only at the table. It is won through preparation, alternatives, and the ability to leave. Most people seek a larger reward while keeping the same position. The wealthy improve the position first. One asks for more from weakness. The other becomes harder to corner. The resistance here is useful. If part of you calls preparation boring, invisible, or too cautious, notice what that judgment protects. Applause is immediate. Position compounds quietly. Money is not merely something to possess, it is a way to alter the terms under which future choices are made. And anyone who improves position must learn not to advertise the improvement too early. Law 5. Keep your advantage quiet. Most people announce progress while it is still fragile. The wealthy understand that premature visibility attracts requests, expectations, comparison, and pressure before the result has hardened. Consider the dinner table. Someone mentions a new income, a possible opportunity, or a planned purchase. Within minutes, advice arrives. Then comes the expectation to share, prove, lend, explain, or maintain an image. The original decision becomes public property. The strategic few do not confuse secrecy with deception. They simply stop offering unfinished plans to every audience. They reveal results when revelation serves a purpose. Until then, silence protects concentration. A person who speaks too early also begins negotiating against an imaginary audience. The plan becomes harder to change because changing it might look like failure. The room never needed to know, yet the room now has a vote. What began as information becomes obligation. Machiavelli observed that intentions are safer when concealed until action gives them weight. In money, announcing every move can make you governable. People learn what you want, what you fear, and how urgently you need approval. Information becomes a handle. Most people use visibility to receive validation. The wealthy use discretion to preserve freedom. One tells the room what is coming and then must perform for the room. The other lets the outcome speak after the choices are complete. This is not permission to manipulate anyone's fear or desire. It is a warning to recognize those triggers in yourself. The need to appear successful can make you reveal the very leverage that would have protected you. A quiet plan has time to change. A public promise demands defense. The aphorism is simple: what must be explained to everyone can be controlled by anyone. Cause. Name the last financial decision that became heavier after it was discussed. Keep the answer private. Silence does not create wealth by itself. It protects the attention required to build it. But attention is still limited, and the next law reveals where the wealthy refuse to spend it. Law 6. Make repetition serve you. Most people believe earning more requires giving more hours forever. The wealthy search for ways to turn one useful decision into many future results through systems, standards, delegation, and deliberate routines. Watch a small, ordinary task. Every week someone manually repeats the same payment, the same report, the same search, the same correction. The work feels responsible because it is familiar. Yet the repeated task quietly taxes every future hour. The strategic few ask which actions should happen once, which should be standardized, and which should no longer require personal presence. They do not worship busyness. They build processes that preserve attention for decisions only judgment can make. The person might spend an evening correcting the same error in a file, then return to the same error 7 days later. Another person spends the first evening fixing the cause, writing a clear standard, and checking whether the new process holds. The first appears more devoted to effort. The second has converted effort into a durable advantage. This is not an invitation to treat other people as disposable tools. It is an invitation to stop treating your own time as infinitely replaceable. A system that creates clarity is ethical. A system that hides harm behind efficiency is merely another form of weakness. Most people increase output by extending effort. The wealthy increase output by improving the structure around effort. One carries every bucket by hand. The other looks for the leak, the root, and the mechanism. Machiavelli understood that a force held together by one exhausted commander is vulnerable. Money behaves the same way when every result depends on constant personal exertion. If this challenges the pride attached to doing everything alone, good. That pride can feel like strength while keeping every gain dependent on your exhaustion. The cold truth is this: a life that cannot function without your continuous strain is not an asset. It is a well-decorated liability. The wealthy do not merely work harder inside the machine, they decide which parts of the machine deserve their presence. Once effort becomes more durable, negotiation becomes the next battlefield. Law 7. Negotiate from alternatives. Most people enter a money conversation hoping to be chosen. The wealthy enter knowing what happens if the answer is no. Their confidence is not always personality. Often it is preparation disguised as calm. A worker asks for better terms while privately believing there is no other path. A buyer rushes because the seller senses attachment. A contractor accepts every condition because one opportunity has been treated as the only opportunity. In each case, desperation leaks before words begin. The strategic few build alternatives before they need them. They develop transferable competence, maintain relationships without begging, preserve reserves, and learn enough about the exchange to recognize weak terms. They do not need to threaten anyone. The ability to leave changes the conversation. Machiavelli warned that dependence is a form of vulnerability. The person who can survive a refusal possesses more negotiating power than the person who performs confidence while needing immediate approval. Most people negotiate for permission to keep their position. The wealthy negotiate from a position designed to survive loss. One says, "Please accept these terms." The other communicates, "These terms must make sense for both sides." Think about a simple service call. If the repair is urgent and no alternative exists, every quoted figure feels final. If time, information, and another option are available, the same figure becomes a proposal rather than a command. Before any serious conversation, ask 3 quiet questions. What can be changed? What can be delayed? What happens if the answer is no? These questions do not manufacture power. They expose whether power already exists or whether dependence is being disguised as confidence. This is not a lesson in exploiting another person's fear. It is a lesson in refusing to let your own fear make you easy to command. The aphorism, "The strongest bargaining voice is the one that can leave without collapsing," use the quiet leverage ratio again here. Reserves and flexibility are not only defensive comforts, they are the quiet foundation beneath a firm no. Yet alternatives can still be destroyed by one careless exposure. The next law protects what you have built from the appetite of the crowd. Law 8. Protect the name behind the money. Most people treat reputation as decoration, something to polish after success arrives. The wealthy treat credibility as a form of capital that lowers friction, opens conversations, and prevents every exchange from beginning at zero. Two people begin with similar ability and similar resources. Over 10 years, one makes promises casually, misses small obligations, and explains every failure as someone else's fault. The other keeps agreements narrow, communicates early, and refuses opportunities that cannot be handled well. Neither path looks dramatic in a single month. After 10 years, one must overpay for trust. The other receives cooperation before asking for it. The strategic few understand that reliability compounds without appearing on a balance sheet. They do not perform generosity to collect admiration. They make their word predictable because predictability gives others a reason to engage. Most people spend credibility to win a moment. The wealthy preserve it for decisions that matter. One borrows against a name for applause. The other invests a name in durable relationships and sound execution. A promise is not valuable because it sounds large. It is valuable because the person making it has learned the boundary of what can actually be carried. Saying less and delivering fully may look modest in the beginning. Over time, restraint becomes evidence. Evidence becomes trust. Trust lowers the resistance around every future exchange. Machiavelli observed that appearances matter because people judge what they can see, but the deeper lesson is not to become an actor. It is to make visible conduct consistent enough that appearances do not need constant repair. The villain here is not a person, it is the game that rewards short-term display and sends the bill for inconsistency later. If this stings because reputation seems unfair, recognize the growth inside the objection. Fairness may be desirable. Strategy still requires knowing how trust actually moves. A fortune can be accumulated quickly and made unusable by one pattern of unreliability. Money attracts attention. Credibility determines whether that attention becomes opportunity or suspicion. What you protect now is not only wealth, it is the identity that can carry wealth without being ruled by it. The final law decides what remains when motivation disappears. Law 9. Become the kind of person whose rules continue without supervision. Most people depend on mood, pressure, and fresh ambition. The wealthy seek permanence through automatic decisions, clear boundaries, and an identity that makes certain actions unnecessary to debate. A person may promise to save, focus, negotiate, and remain quiet. Then fatigue arrives. A difficult week arrives. A social invitation arrives. If every principle must be defended from the beginning each time, the principle is still fragile. The strategic few reduce the number of moments in which they can betray their own long game. They establish defaults. They separate essential decisions from emotional weather. They make restraint ordinary, review deliberate, and commitments visible to themselves, even when no audience is watching. Most people ask, what should be done today? The wealthy ask, what structure makes the right action continue when today becomes difficult? One relies on character under pressure, the other designs pressure out of the decision. Machiavelli understood that temporary victories fade when they are not secured by institutions, habits, and loyalty. Your financial life also needs more than a good season. It needs rules that survive your moods. This is not about becoming cold toward people. It is about becoming warm toward the future and refusing to sacrifice it for every present demand. Not obsession, not perfection. Continuity. Imagine looking back 10 years from now. One version of you kept waiting to feel ready. Another built a life where money was captured, examined, given room, directed quietly, turned into position, and protected by conduct. The difference was not a single dramatic event. It was the identity repeated when nobody applauded. That identity is built in ordinary scenes. The moment a purchase is delayed, the moment an offer is questioned, the moment silence is chosen over display, the moment a small reserve is protected instead of consumed. No single moment looks powerful. Together they decide what kind of person can be trusted with greater freedom. The final aphorism is this: wealth becomes permanent when discipline stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like your nature. The game cannot easily command a person who owns their attention, their margin, their alternatives, and their silence. That is the pattern beneath the money. Not merely having more, but becoming less governable. This was only the visible edge of the map. The deeper territory is now in front of you. Most people will hear these ideas, feel the brief discomfort, and return to the same arrangements that keep them dependent. Pinned beneath this video is Virtue, the Machiavelli doctrine. It is not a lecture, not a motivational speech, and not another video, but the full doctrine behind this way of reading money, people, and power, three territories called gold, crown, and iron. You choose which territory to take first. Tap the pinned comment. Waiting there is the cold system of rules the powerful never say out loud. Subscribe to Machiavelli's gold frequency as an act of refusing the comfortable script that keeps ownership out of reach. The choice is no longer between knowing and not knowing. It is between remaining easy to direct and becoming difficult to control. Which one will your habits prove you are?